What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Let's Ask Paul, the podcast where you get to ask me, Paul Abernathy, any code question that you want on any edition of the National Electrical Code, whether it's the 2023 that just came out a couple months ago, which is where we're going to be focusing majority of our education moving forward to get people ready for that new cycle. Of course, we'll point out anything that's in the 2020 to make it clear in case you kind of stumble on it and you're still working in the 2020. We're pretty much putting 2017 to pasture, although we have videos out there on that. We have courses on that, and we have other things that are on that. As far as moving forward, we're going to pretty much focus on 2023 with a touch of 2020 as we keep people relevant to whatever cycle you may be on in the recent editions. So anyway, welcome to the show. If you've stumbled across us on any of our favorite podcast listening platforms like Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of those type of things, the most people that listen will listen via the Apple Podcasts. For some reason, it seems to be the most popular. But you can find us on any of those popular listening platforms. Just go and search for Master the NEC. And you'll get our Let's Ask Paul series as well as my Master the NEC stuff, as well as occasionally you'll get a mobile, mini mobile, which is 10, 15 minutes of me in the vehicle just doing some talking and things like that. So if you like that type of thing, again, there's hundreds of them, so you can scroll through them and listen to all of them. All of the Let's Ask Paul are actually available over on paulabernathy.com if you'd rather listen that way. Now in the mobile app, the new mobile app, we're going to be adding a podcast link to that app here shortly, so you can again go back to listening through the app alone if you've got our new app. If you got the old app, you can still do that. It's still in there, but we're going to be moving to the new app here very shortly, within the next day or so. So, and you just simply scroll through them and listen to whatever you want to listen to. There's hundreds of them. They're not really organized great. You know what I mean? So the titles, and you don't know everything that's being discussed in the podcast. And I'm going to be honest with you, I really don't have the desire to go back and try to index all of them. I really don't. So anyway, so again, more often than not, you're just listening because you're a fan of the show. You like to listen to the podcast. So just go back and listen to your heart's content. And I will tell you, some of the shows that came out in 2021 and early part of 2022 are amazing shows. We had a lot of time on our hands, and even some of the late 2020s that they really were some deep shows. So I encourage you to go check those out, most definitely. All right, well, welcome. So today's show is actually going to be sponsored by our main new corporate website, where you can actually get information on 3 CBD products that I recommend because I use them. I've got kind of a bum shoulder from years in the field and, lifting raceways and things like that above my head. I'm doing a lot of that manual stuff that, when you're young, you think you never catch up with you. It caught up. And so I use it. So check it out. If you go to our website, you'll actually see a link on the front. You might have to scroll down if you're on a mobile device. You scroll down, you'll see under there that it says Paul's Recommendations, and there's a couple of the CBD ointments and things that I actually recommend, sleep aids. They actually work, so that's why I recommend them. Notice in advance, it is an affiliate program, so we're making a few bucks on it, so if you're wanting to support the show, that's another way you can do it. So anyway, there you go. So changes, just to let you know what we've got going on. We've got a code change. It's not for any credits. So the first thing that people will send me is, do I get any CEU credits? Absolutely not. We're just not doing that. If you do want to get CEU credits, we do have a partnership on our website that you can get some CEU credits, but we're not doing it. They're not from us, if you will. So I'm just not into having to submit to every state in order to get approval for every state. Now, back when I was traveling a lot, that was easy. And when Encore Wire supported it, that was easy because I could just, submit it and we would do it. We're not really doing that anymore, so don't look for that. But if you want to get some understanding, knowledge base of things that are changing, we're going to be doing a webinar on code changes coming up here in the next couple of months. So look out for that. We will cover the changes to, the significant changes to 2023. So that's in the works. The new studio, there's been a little bit of a hiccup with that. It's not going to change our production schedule, but there is a bit of a hiccup with that. So we might be staying in our current studio and we might be remodeling it as a better alternative. I'll keep you posted on that. It's not going to change the new content and what we've got going on because all of the equipment's still, on order, and we're going to use it either way. So that's not a big deal. Our Rodecaster Pro 2 is all updated. Everything is good. So we're good with everything else. Cameras, lighting, and all good. The CMECP corner is going to still take place. So we'll take care of all that. All right. So let me go on and get into some questions that were submitted so we can answer them for folks. And let's see here. Let me see if I can get this first one here. Okay. So the first one says, hello, Paul. My question is about 700.12 from the 2017 NEC. I am currently the inspector on a new hospital that was started in the middle of 2017 code cycle. The hospital has a generator building to supply backup power for the essential electrical system. Okay. Does just the generator have to be powered up to lose up on a loss of normal power within 10 seconds? Or does the life safety transfer switch also have to engage in these 10 seconds? Thank you. Okay, good question. So I answered this question via email to make it clear. The references I gave were 517.32b and 517.26. So in my opinion, since the transfer switch is kind of the linchpin to the emergency system, and of course, being a healthcare facility, and this actually being part of the EES 1 part of it, okay, which is the life safety branch, then for me, what happens is the 10-second requirement applies, right? It applies to the generator, and it applies to the transfer switch. Together, they have to work in tandem to bring power up within 10 seconds. Now, remember, it could be less than 10 seconds if the AHJ determines that it needs to be for whatever reason, and most of them will not. They won't get involved in that, okay? They just follow the rule where it says that, within 10 seconds as we follow it when we're looking at Article 700. So, interesting thing about 517, there are some areas in 517 that don't have to be in accordance with Article 700, and it'll tell you that. So in this case, because you're dealing with that type of system and you didn't give any further detail or clarification, then we're going to assume that this is, since you say it was a life safety transfer, a lot of people get confused with the life safety versus critical branch, right? The life safety branch is, kind of think of that as getting out of the building. Okay, keeping systems running to get me out of the building, that type of life safety. And critical branch has to do with other things within the hospital application. Means that the AHJ, whoever the hospital administrator is, can determine certain loads that can be on the critical branch. But the life safety is more or less the egress lighting, things like that. It allows me any alarming systems that allows me to get out of the building or out of the structure, right, to preserve life that way. So two different things. The life safety most certainly has to be on the 10 seconds of transfer. So does the critical, by the way, those that are designated for critical. But I think that you have to understand that the transfer switch is the linchpin for the generator. So the generator is, if it's emergency rated, that it has to come on, and the transfer is what has to be able to transfer that power from power loss to the emergency generator in 10 seconds or less. And so it would be my belief, absolutely, that it's going to apply to the transfer switch no differently. no differently than it would be to the generator itself. Now, remember, even a generator is going to be able to handle other loads other than just emergency, right? And we have a thought of different types of things like emergency, legally required, and then optional. Depending with the hospital, the number of transfer switches that you have is a lot going to be dependent on the KVA that is calculated out for that hospital. So again, I'm not going to go into that lesson today, but you're going to have to work with the AHJ and the hospital administrator in order to determine that level. But it didn't sound like you were asking for the number of transfer switches. You just wanted to know whether or not it had the generator and the transfer switch. Well, again, it would do no good if the generator couldn't come on within 10 seconds for the transfer switch to be able to transfer within 10 seconds. It wouldn't be no good unless they work together. But the deal with the 10 seconds is getting that power and having the egress lighting and having all that stuff come on within 10 seconds, that type of thing. Or even if it was being used for critical power, correct? Critical branch circuits. If they were designated, it's significant that within 10 seconds they're back into operation, right? So what's the linchpin for that? It's the transfer switch, right? But we have to assume the generator comes on, right? So that's important. And if the generator is listed for emergency use, it's probably going to be designed so that it comes on that way. But the transfer switch has to send the information to the generator to tell them of loss of power that it needs to come on. So they have to work in tandem. So hopefully that answers your question, or at least tries to answer your question on that one. Okay. All right. Let's see here. What is the next question that we have that was submitted? Bear with me while I go through and try to find some of these extra ones. Also, while I'm looking here real quick, because I got them all listed down, but I didn't go back through them. Remember, folks that are out there that listen and actually go to our websites, Electrical Code Academy is still online. Okay, so that's another thing that people were like, oh, I see you're shifting to new websites. It's still online. It's not going anywhere for any time in the short term. We're trying to migrate to fasttracksystem.com, but I can promise you I don't get rid of domains easily, right? So eventually, electricalcodeacademy.net.org.com is all going to refer to Fast Track System anyway. So, in fact, Electrical Code Academy might turn purely commercial for our corporate accounts in order to, the companies that we do bulk courses for, turnkey education, okay? But the general courses like our Fast Tracks and things like that, they're going to slowly be moved over into our Fast Track System website. The key thing to remember is all of our websites are different. Treat all of them separately. They're not all just the same passwords for everything. They're not. They're individual passwords, individual. Now, if you want to use your same email and password when you register on all of them to make your life easier, go for it. But I just want to make it clear they're all different websites, right? Okay. All right, so the next question that was presented says, Paul, what are your thoughts about adding ground rods to an exterior pole-mounted sub-panel dedicated for outdoor lighting only? The service panel is also located outside within 50 feet of the sub with the required ground rods. Not being installed in the structure or building, I do not see the need for the extra rods, but would like it cause any problems. Okay, hold on. For the extra rods, but would it cause any problems if they were installed? To clarify the question, I recently came across this type of installation and it got me thinking. Okay. All right. So I did respond back to the individual who sent that and gave him some assistance on this. And so kind of what I've said was the question is establishing a grounding electrode system. In your case, ground rods at a separate structure as defined in Article 100 is clear. If a remote distribution panel, and referred to as a sub panel, is installed on a pole, board, or at a separate building structure, then it must have a grounding electrode system. The only exception is that it is simply installing a branch circuit to those, and you wouldn't have any distribution panel there, right? It'd be just the receptacles and switches for lighting. It wouldn't be anything with breakers in it, right? So it wouldn't be a feeder. it would be just branch circuits for individual loads extended to a detached structure, or in this case, a pole. But since they're putting a panel there, and it is a structure that was built, then it has to have its own grounding electrode system. So since it was stated that it was a sub, okay, remote distribution panel, sub being a subset of the distribution panel. So I'm okay when people say sub panel. I get it. We all get it. Some people freak out about it, but that's just ultra nerdy. At the end of the day, we know what we're talking about here. It says, and you must meet the rules of 250.32a. And the electrodes utilized can be any specified in Part 3 of Article 250. So to me, you needed to establish a grounding electrode system. So the other building happens to have its grounding electrode system. Okay. Now you say it's a certain distance away. It's not practical to try to use that electrode. Okay. The electrodes are electrodes, right? But it's of a distance away that makes it impractical to do that. So you simply just, establish your grounding electrode system at this new structure and be done with it. Move on. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Let's see here. All right. The next question I have, it says, if a raceway having 120-208 volts circuits enters into a disconnect having concentric KOs, does Article 250.97 apply? Okay. All right. So that's the next the question that was presented to me. Let me see here. So one of the things to remember in this kind of question like this is what is being asked, right? So in this case, and I lost the question because I got to get back to it so I can read it in more detail. Hold on. This is what happens when you got so many freaking questions. I mean, they literally just come in one after another, and I'm trying to get to them all. Let me see if I can find where he was at again. Hold on. Bear with me. So unprofessional of me to not have it ready for you, right? Okay, there it is. Okay, so anyway, so the question is, if a raceway having a 120-208 volt circuit enters into a disconnecting and have concentric KOs, does Article 250.97 apply? Okay, so that was the question that was sent to me. Okay, now the thing about this is that you need to look at 250.97, because if you look at 250.97, you're going to see what? Well, I got my code book. Let's go on and get your code book out if you got your code book. If you don't have your code book, don't worry. Just listen. I'll tell you. So 250.97, one of the key things about it is that if you look at the title, it says bonding for over 250 volts. Okay, so over 250 volts to ground. Okay, then you'll need to do a little extra bonding, and it goes on to tell you, hey, use the methods in 250.92b, which is more like for services. Okay. But this is for bonding of over 250 volts. All right, so one of the misconceptions here is, first of all, in this one, it's 120-208, there's no aspect of over 250 volts here. In fact, it's not even mentioned. So to answer your question short, it's not going to matter. 250.97 is not going to come into play for your installation, and you're going to bond just like you normally would. Now, it's a feeder. Chances are that those concentric or eccentrics all meet are listed for use. And if you just use a proper fitting, proper connector, lock nut, do whatever you're doing, then you're going to be fine. You don't have to meet the extra requirements of 250.97, right? You don't have to do anything more, okay? So hopefully that answers the question. But when we talk about over 250, we're talking about 250 to ground. So it would apply to 277 480 applications, because 277 is 277 to ground. So that would be over 250 to ground. So you would have to do something a little extra. Okay. Got to meet all the general requirements of 250.92b. Obviously, you can't use the neutral for that. So that one's out. I think that's B1. But you have all these other options you can use to follow in order to do that assured bonding, is what we used to call it, assured bonding. but doesn't come into play with your question because you're only dealing with 120, 208, and it's actually 120 to ground, and that is nowhere near 250 to ground, okay, over 250 to ground. So doesn't play a role in that one, so hopefully that answers your question about that one. Sorry that took me a little bit to find that. Okay. Next question, it comes in. Now, this is not, I shouldn't say seems to be a lot. It's a question that does get asked from time to time. And so it's probably one of those good ones to address because I haven't really done any from, Let's Ask Paul's from the studio in a while. It's been hectic here, a lot going on. So I haven't had time to really sit down and answer any questions for anybody. Really deep questions, if you want to. So I figured I'd kind of cover as many of them in this episode because it has been a while. So, okay. So this one says, "Hello, Paul. I've been listening to your podcast for the last 2 years and greatly appreciate your content you provide. I had a conversation with a journeyman about 250.64E1, and he informed me that the aluminum conduit needs to be electrically continuous by bonding each end. I had a rebuttal that aluminum is non-ferrous and does not require a supply-side bonding jumper. Non-ferrous metal raceways, and this is a quote, by the way, non-ferrous metal raceways, enclosures, and cable armor shall not be required to be electrically continuous, end of quote, in 250.64E1. He proceeded to inform me that the aluminum will produce a choke effect even if it's non-ferrous metal. I made an effort to explain that there is no iron and how can a choke effect occur, but he proceeded to disagree. His final statement was that if you drop a magnet down a aluminum tube, it will move slowly, making the need for supply-side bonding jumpers. Have I misunderstood or is the journeyman correct? Thank you for your time and answering the question." Okay. Well, let me put it to you. Let me kind of do it this way. Sometimes when you have an argument with somebody like that who is insistent that they're knowledgeable on something, is obviously aluminum is non-ferrous. Okay, there's no iron involved in it. Okay, there's no steel application to it. Okay, it's non-ferrous. The code tells us that it's non-ferrous. Okay. Dropping a magnet down something and having it slow down, maybe the coefficient of friction differential or whatnot. It's still, who does that? I mean, nobody's testing like that. Nobody is trying to assimilate the dropping of any magnet down a raceway like that and determining whether or not it creates a choke effect. So I'll go out and first and say the journeyman is incorrect, or he's been given incorrect information. Now, when you're running conductors in aluminum, and let's say you weren't dividing conductors up properly if they're being run in parallel, then it will create, a situation where you have induced voltages, but it's not going to create the same level of heat that you would get from separating of conductors and creating this inductive heating situation because you don't have a ferrous raceway. So without going too deep, sometimes it's easier just to walk away and shake your head. But I get it. You want to be able to educate. Okay. So, again, there's a lot of things that you can give them. You can send them to let them know that, again, aluminum is non-ferrous. The rule only requires bonding at both ends if it's a ferrous raceway. It says it right in the code. Okay. And you quoted the references. Okay. And it's pretty clear in 250.64E1. All right. So you can, inform him that, give him some education. I believe I gave you actually a link to a very detailed explanation between ferrous and non-ferrous metal that probably explained that. But at the end of the day, it's the last sentence, in 250.64E1 that says, as you quote, the last sentence is, tell them all they need to know. Once established that the raceway is a non-ferrous, then it's not required to be made electrically continuous, period. The GEC can simply exit the raceway and connect to the electrode no differently than it would if it was installed in PVC Schedule 80 raceway. It's no different as far as the code's concerned. An inductive choke cannot happen in this non-ferrous raceway or armor. Okay, so he's just simply wrong in his assessment. Now, again, however he doesn't care to learn or doesn't understand the concepts of ferrous versus non-ferrous, if that scenario, I bet he probably still thinks you have to bond PVC. So again, I'm not sure how else I can help you with that one. It is what it is. So you just kind of got to shake your head and just kind of give him the facts and move on. That's about all you can do. I will tell you that a lot of people will challenge you as you become more knowledgeable. I tell people all the time, when you're in our Fast Tracks program and you really start learning the code and you start coming to our Wednesday night sessions and you really start bringing up these questions and we get into deep thought. Last week, I think we talked about ampacity. And we talked about 210.19 A1A and B, and when you apply the 125% for continuous, and then when you don't have to, when you're doing like the same continuous load, but we have a condition of use that's involved, like a adjustment or correction. Then you get to ignore the continuous load and just treat it at the actual load. We got deep into that, and that's going to be one of the more complicated things to understand when it comes to calculations and understanding how to do those type of things. So that's the kind of deepness we get in our, when we're talking about those different aspects of our program. So sometimes you just got to take somebody and just say, dude, I'm not going to argue with you. You do you, I'll do me, and we'll just go on. Okay. The last one, it says, hi, my name is blank. I listened to your podcast today. Paul, I absolutely love it. I'm 44 years old. I'm a Federal Express driver, and job is kicking my blank physically. I have no experience in electrical here in New Jersey. I'm looking into going to Lincoln Tech School for electricians at 44 years old. I have taken law enforcement tests. I've gotten my high school diploma at a late age. I know how stressful tests can be. I have a 7-year-old little girl. I'm with a woman who I want to marry and have a son or daughter with one day. You better get started. You're 44. And although it's a little easier for a guy to do that, right? And I need to get a better career. What do I have to lose by going for this challenge? Can I succeed at 44 years old and turn my life around and become an electrician and get that license? I appreciate your time. This is a shot in the dark for your reply, sort of like a flare in the night. What do you suggest I do, and how to take on this huge mountain to climb, and if it can be done? Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, kudos to you for thinking of your children, thinking of your future children, thinking of making a better future for your family and your future wife. I'm sure she will. A thoughtful person like you, I am sure she will accept you with open arms. So let's talk the career. So FedEx is kicking your butt, but I don't know how long you've been there, but chances are you're making really good money as a FedEx driver. So I'm not going to altogether give you the advice that you would expect some people to give you, like, oh yeah, the electrical trade is amazing, drop everything. Okay, electrical trade is an amazing trade. Okay, I love it. I've spent my career in it, but I started early. Okay, 16, 15 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. So I'm not going to discourage you from it. And I have nothing against the Lincoln Techs and all those. They will teach you all the fundamentals that you need. Some people will yell out there and go, do apprenticeship program. Some people say, don't do it. No, I'm not going to get into that crap one or another. Okay, so let's just assume education. You're wanting to become an electrician. It's not brain surgery, but it is fundamentals that we have to learn, right? And so the couple things I will state building a family at 44 is people tend to think your career is at the ladder at 44. You're like at the end. You got to remember, you're probably going to work until you're at least 64 or 65. Some people longer than that. So you still got 20 years. Okay. A lot of people retire after 20. 20 years can be a career. So when you make an investment in yourself, you got to remember that even though we're at an elevated age, we're looking at the long-term picture. And we have to remember is money our only goal? Okay. You could do very well as an electrician, but it depends on where you want to go as an electrician. Okay. And how much responsibility you want to take on as to be an electrician, whether you want to move from an apprentice to a journeyman lead, to a master, to a lead, to somebody in a larger company where you take on a lot of responsibility, and with that comes more money. And then you maybe someday move up into ownership or something. I mean, there's a path. Now, I'm going to grant you this. You've got a less time to create that path. But again, is a couple things that we have to look at because financially, if you're doing well with Federal Express and you want to provide your family with things, then I never say cut one job off while you're doing others. So you could do some of the rudimentary stuff online to learn fundamentals, like our electrical theory course, things like that, to kind of dip your toe in to see if it's really something you want to do. And if you have a night class, if the Lincoln's a night class and you're up to it at 44, barring testosterone injections, you're going to be able to do a night course or something like that. Then you can keep your day and do the night just to see if it's what you want to do, right? I'm a big believer that you don't give up what you're doing for something else right away. Some people will cut cold turkey. I always tell people, don't quit a job you have until you have something else that can take its place. So it's okay to be working on your plan B while you're still living your plan A, right? As far as jobs are concerned. At 44, you're not too old, all right? Electricity is an amazing trade. The deal with it is that you're going to have to make the lower end of the money spectrum. Probably not going to make anything near what you're making as a FedEx driver if you've been there for a good amount of time, because typically FedEx takes care of their drivers. I mean, typically they do. This case, it's just beating you up. And it is. That's a brutal running. I'm sure there's things that we don't know about packages as far as timing, how much you have to spend to deliver each package. And when I see the dudes running, I'm thinking, okay, they're on the clock, that type of thing. So I get that. Also, you might want to look if you've been there a good length of time, you might want to talk to supervisors about another position within FedEx to move up to management, supervisory, in shipping, distribution. There might be other avenues for you rather than totally cutting the cord. I don't know there is, and I'm assuming you've already done those. Now, if you're just at that midlife crisis where you're like, okay, I just want to cut the cord. I'm done at FedEx. I'm just done. Okay. Electricity is a great trade. Just remember at 44, you're going to start from the bottom. Okay. You're going to be making $12, $10, $11, 14, 13, depending on where you're at. You're going to be making low pay. You have to be okay with that. You have to have a spouse that is very much supportive of that, going for a career. I was lucky early on that my wife worked with me intimately in everything we did. Any businesses I had when I started out, good for her was that I had already was well established in electrical before we met. But as I did other things when I went to school, after high school, after I went out and decided I wanted to go back and get degrees, she was supportive of me working at nights and trying to work towards that degree. And I'm going to be honest with you, the universities that I worked with were very helpful. Today, they would not be. Today, my degrees wouldn't matter a hill of beans today. They're not as flexible, believe it or not, today as they were then. So, anyway, it's a great profession, and I think you do it. But just be prepared to if you're financially prepared to start at the bottom and get licensing. It's going to take you 4 years, but depending on where you're at. So, if you're stellar as an apprentice and you really take it serious, an advantage you have is that usually the young people coming in don't take things serious, right? They don't take any of this stuff serious. If you're at 44, you're going to be very serious. So the other part is you're going to have to, being an electrician is also very physical, believe it or not. Okay. I want to make sure you know that because you're talking about how physically FedEx driver kicks your, okay. I can tell you that when I was younger and I was learning the trade, it was in order to make the good money. Of course, I will say I was always pretty much ownership right off the bat, even except when I was really younger, working for companies, generating experience. And then I rapidly moved into leadership roles. One, because I did so well in vocational school that the local community took notice. And when I started winning competitions, the sponsors of the electrical program were the companies I went to work for. So they were very much engaged in what our vocational school was doing. So I already had a leg up, right? So they already knew who I was. So it's not fair to everybody. I had a help up. My instructor was very influential, and he made sure everybody knew who I was. It doesn't happen for everybody. Okay, Mr. Barrett Bob was special, and he was like a second father to me, and he treated it like that, and he promoted me like that. So I had a little more than the normal would get, a boost. Okay, not a handout, but a hand up. So you're going to have to start from the bottom as long as you're prepared to do that, but you're going to shine. But don't think that the electrical work is not physical, because whether or not you're humping reels of cable upstairs or lifting trade size 4 rigid or IMC or whatever you're doing, unless you're just going to do residential, and that's also can be challenging. You got to hustle on those jobs. Okay, you don't sit still. Don't think a residential electrician just sits around casually. No, they make more money the quicker they get it done. Right? So as long as you're prepared for that and you're willing to get into that type of thing, and you're willing to start at the bottom, then I say go for it. It's a great trade. Of all of the trades, that would be my choice. Obviously, I'm biased, that type of thing. Okay? All right. So that's the best I can answer that question for you. Hopefully that answered that for you. And for those out there who didn't care to listen to that, piss on you. I like to answer all types of questions. So that's it for today, folks. Hopefully you got something out of this episode of Let's Ask Paul. Remember, you can send your questions in to paulabernathy.com. You just simply go there. There's a portal, and you click on that portal, and you can submit your information, and I will answer it either in an email or in a podcast. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless.